Upheaval, Reckoning, Chapter 20. Dragonkind. Spike! The very familiar voice shook Spike out of his lethargy. Huh? He mumbled. Spike, pay attention. That was Rarity's voice. Spike realized that he was sitting on a bed in a brightly lit and elaborately decorated room. He recognized the bunch of pony mannequins grouped by one corner and the sewing machine that sat on a nearby table. The bedsheet was decorated with a diamond pattern, as were the walls. "Rarity?" he asked. "What's going on?" "I brought you here, remember?" Rarity replied. Spike's claws went to his tail for comfort. She was staring at him rather seriously. Well, what is it then?" "Spike, I'm quite aware that you have certain feelings for me." "What? But how did you? I didn't get to say it that time, so what could have—" A hoof stopped his spluttering protests. "Recently I've become aware that I'm starting to feel something similar." Spike's jaw dropped. "Really?" "Which is why I brought you here in the privacy of my bedroom, so we can explore these feelings properly rather than embarrassing ourselves out on the street or some such thing." Sure, Rarity. I don't mind talking about my feelings and—" Spike shuddered and stopped when Rarity's face moved closer to his. She placed both front hoofs on his shoulders and gently pushed him on his back. "Talking wasn't what I had in mind." Spike found himself unable to speak. The room faded into darkness while Rarity's face came closer and closer and faded into black as well. Spike still lay there expectantly until reality settled in. He wasn't on the nice, soft bed of the most beautiful pony in all of Equestria. He was laying back first on a hastily put-together pile of earthen furs. He remembered why it was so dark. He was in the deepest part of Seafscale's cave. The faraway entrance provided the only bit of light. With a groan, Spike rose reluctantly from his bedding and looked around despite how futile that move was. He was in complete darkness. He had been so for the greater portion of his first week. For the first couple of days he relied on the torches positioned along the cave, but they eventually burned out and he couldn't find any replacements. When he asked Seascale about getting more, the Kirin didn't even bother to reply. He had started gathering bits of dead branches from the woods nearby, but the few he collected were far from enough to illuminate the enormous cave. Indeed, his first week with Seascale could be summed up perfectly by stumbling in the dark. He wished that the Kirin was an angry, cursing sort of teacher like Dr. Redbrand or Mate Captain Owlside. Even that would be something. Seafscale didn't shout or growl at him at all, but that was because she would barely even talk to him. He could count on one claw the number of times she would say anything in a day. She hadn't even bothered to set any rules about her lair. The fear of touching something he shouldn't touch, or saying something he shouldn't say, all but rendered him paralyzed around her. Instead of talking, Seascale spent hours just lying in the dark. Prince Terrado had mentioned that the Kirin got a little broody at times. The prince had obviously understated that aspect. Seafscale brooded nearly all the time next to her small hoard of golden coins and jewelry. If she wasn't doing that, she was out getting food. She came home with meat most of the time, but winter had already settled and most of the wildlife had gone into hibernation or migrated. On a few occasions, Seascale came back with picked vegetables from the nearby city of Wallforge. Spike relished the chance to eat something more familiar. Meat was delicious, he had to admit that. He also had to admit that his pointed teeth were more at home with tearing through meat than grinding plants or gemstones, but he still favored the familiar comforts of food he had grown up with. That small comfort did little to make his stay with Seafscale any more pleasant. He continued to wait for some kind of instruction on her part, but the week passed with him awkwardly trying to pass the time. That had to end. This morning he was going to talk to Seafscale and straighten things out. Seafscale was near the cave's entrance and stretching her wings when Spike approached her. Excuse me?" he said. No response came. She didn't even seem to hear him, but he already expected that. He had tried several times to talk to her, and he knew that it was an uphill battle to even get her to notice him, let alone speak. "Hey!" he said with a much louder voice. "Down here!" Seafscale faced Spike. "I heard you," she said. The sunlight from the entrance let him see more of her face. She didn't look angry or even annoyed. Listen, Spike grabbed a hold of his tail. I understand if you don't like me and don't want me in your cave. If you don't want to have anything to do with me, just say so. I can just go away and find my way back to the Northern Barrier Land. There was only silence for some time after Spike said that. What makes you think that I don't want you around? Thiefscale asked. Well, I feel like an unwanted guest in your cave for one thing, Spike replied. I just came here to grow stronger. If you don't... What I feel or want doesn't matter, Thiefscale replied. The prince has given me the task of helping you, and I will do so. But we haven't done anything in a week. How is just standing around a cave supposed to help me? Thiefscale tilted her head slightly and took a closer look at Spike. You're upset, she said. The proximity of the Kiran's head took Spike aback. He could pick out some of the wickedly pointed teeth that protruded from her upper lip, and he could smell smoke mingling with her breath. Well, maybe a little, he replied. Thiefscale pulled back. I needed some time to get used to having you in my cave, she replied. Just getting used to your presence and scent has been surprisingly difficult. We could still talk, right? The process goes two ways. I had to get used to sharing my cave with another, and you had to get used to some degree of isolation. Thiefscale walked towards the sunlight, with Spike following close behind. You've spent too long being a pony. Ponies are day-active herd creatures. You share their love of conversation and need for a great deal of light. I've spent too long living like a full dragon. When you first entered my cave, my first instinct was to kill you before you get anywhere near my heart. I was hoping that we can spend some time adjusting. You as a dragon, me as a pony. Did it work? Spike asked. He could feel a smile coming out. All the awkward waiting had some purpose behind it after all. I don't know, Thiefscale replied. I haven't killed and eaten you. That has to be worth something. Once more Spike noticed the rows of pointed teeth. Don't worry, he said. It's worth a lot. But did we really need an entire week for the... Spike caught himself too late. Not to question your methods or anything. Interesting, Thiefscale said. Does a week seem that long to you? Well, yeah, 7 days is pretty long. For a pony. Huh? Thiefscale flexed her wings some more. She appeared in deep thought for a couple of minutes. Suddenly, instead of flying off, she sat by the entrance of her cave and gestured for Spike to sit nearby. A week is nothing to a dragon, she said. One reason it bothers you is because you're in pony time. Slow down and try to perceive things more as a dragon. Spike sat just a few feet from the Kiran. A week did feel long to him, but now that he thought about it, he was barely used to being around Thiefscale or living in a cave. And what's the other reason? He asked. You're waiting for lessons the way ponies teach them, Thiefscale replied. You're not here for lessons like some foal in a pony school. Before Spike could say anything, he noticed Thiefscale's ears perk up and her nostrils flare. She walked over towards the trail to her cave. That's far enough, she growled. Spike walked over to see who had arrived. Mudslide had been allowed to approach the cave's entrance and even talk to the reclusive Kiran, whereas this visitor was kept at a distance and greeted angrily. Even as he went over to look, he had to keep his distance from Thiefscale. She was projecting a great deal of heat, enough to melt the snow near her. Her fur bristled and her eyes lit up as if they had small flames within them. Greetings, mighty Thiefscale, someone said from down the trail. Spike looked more closely and saw a group of 5 ponies, 2 of whom were pulling a wagon behind them while the other 3 led the way. The lead pony, a green unicorn with a long, curly mane of bright yellow, had stepped forward to speak for their group. Though he stumbled with his opening words, he carried himself with a degree of confidence. Deliveries have already been made, Thiefscale said, her tone low and dangerous. I don't like ponies being this close to my home, she snorted, causing a brief stream of dark red flame to billow from her nostrils. We mean no disrespect, the lead pony said. He bowed low to emphasize his point, and the others followed his example. We are here on behalf of Mayor Goldplate. Leave, Thiefscale hissed. We will, mighty Thiefscale, the lead pony said. He gestured toward the wagon behind him. At once, the two ponies who were not pulling the wagon trotted over and removed its cover. Underneath was a sizable pile of gold coins and jewels. Spike wiped some drool off his mouth.
"All we ask is that you accept this tribute from the mayor in honor of your constant vigil over Wallforge."
Thiefscale looked the wagon over, a low growl resounding within her throat. "I said leave," she said. They unfastened the wagon and departed hastily after one final bow. Spike could hear their heart gallop as they made their way back to the city. Thiefscale grabbed hold of the wagon and lifted it with ease, placing the entire thing in front of him. "It's yours," she said. "Eat what you want and bury what's left somewhere outside my cave." Spike's mouth watered some more as he clambered over the wagon. The gems in the pile sparkled temptingly. He took a particularly impressive sapphire and was about to pop it into his mouth when he looked over to Thiefscale. The Karen no longer looked angry as she watched the trail to her home. "Are you sure I can have this?" he asked. "Yes." "But why? Those ponies gave these to you for watching over them." "No," Thiefscale said. Every trace of emotion had faded from her voice. "Wallforge elections are coming up and Goldplate wants a show of support. You want a lesson, Spike? Learn this one well. As your strength grows, so will the number of those who want to use it." She watched with interest as Spike inspected his new hoard. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Great," Spike replied as he looked over the gems. "Thank you for giving all these to me." Thiefscale continued to quietly observe. Spike tried to focus on eating, but Thiefscale's scrutiny weighed down on him. He glanced nervously at her several times before finally turning around. Do you need something?" he asked. "Your temperance is surprising," Thiefscale said. "Do you not feel any urge to collect more treasure after gaining such a large hoard?" "What? Oh no, I'm done with that. One hoarding spree is enough for me." "I see. Did you grow at an alarming rate during that time?" "Yep, I turned into a real monster for a day." "Tell me how it all happened." Thiefscale walked over and lay down just a few feet away from Spike. He related the whole incident, although he was careful enough to avoid mentioning his interrupted attempts to confess his feelings for Rarity or anything to that regard. Throughout the story, Thiefscale listened intently. "This Rarity, do you love her?" she asked. Spike's eyes widened. "No," he protested. He clamped both claws on his mouth. Why'd you say that?" "The tone you take and the look on your face say it all," Thiefscale replied. "You may as well wear a shirt with her face on it." "That's not a bad thing, is it?" Spike asked. "I'd understand if you don't like the thought of it because, well..." "Why should what I think matter? Are you going to force yourself on this Rarity and make her bear a Kirin foal?" "What? Of course not. I would never think of doing such a thing to her." "Then you decide for yourself what to make of your feelings. Spend more time understanding your dragon aspect, then look at your relationships. I will say this, however. This Rarity has been a good influence to you. She's taught you to control your gluttony, lust, and greed. From your story, you've successfully overcome your appetite phase, thanks to her." Spike smiled at the thought of Rarity being able to help him overcome something. It was true, he had reverted to normal during that time thanks to her. What Thiefscale had mentioned intrigued him, however. "What's this appetite phase?" he asked. "It's the first of the phases that dragons go through in their lifetime. Dragons in this phase are overcome by lust, gluttony, or greed, whichever resides within them the strongest. If your greed had defined you strongly enough, you would have remained a greed dragon for the rest of your life." "What about the other phases?" "The expression phase tests your pride, wrath, or envy. If you are still not defined by these things, you will go through the apathy phase, which guarantees that you'll turn into a sloth dragon." "Is that it?" Spike asked glumly. "Are dragons always defined by bad things?" "Supposedly." Thiefscale stopped herself. "Supposedly what?" "Don't concern yourself much about these things. They will come in time, and what sort of a dragon you are will be revealed. Seafscale stood up and flapped her wings. "I have to go," she said. "Stay in the cave as always." She flew off afterwards. Although still confused, Spike popped the first gem into his mouth and savored the crunch against his teeth. He grabbed a handful of gems to snack on, then began looking around for a good hiding place. He doubted that there would be any thieves willing to risk approaching the home of a clearly territorial half-dragon, but he wasn't going to risk this bounty. With this pile, he may not have to eat any more meat. It was already sunset when Seafscale returned. During that time, Spike had kept himself busy burying his new loot all around the cave. The frozen ground was difficult to dig up, even for his practiced claws. He had also reflected upon how Seafscale behaved around ponies. By the time she arrived, he had questions already rehearsed. He stood by his space in the cave and quietly watched her, trying to find some kind of sign that it was a good idea to speak up. Seafscale," he finally ventured to say. The Kirin lay down by her bed before looking at Spike. "How's your vision?" she asked. "It's fine, thanks. Spike paused. "Fine?" He looked around. He should be completely blind in this cave, but he wasn't. Seafscale lay there in plain sight. He could see the cave as a whole now, albeit in various shades of gray. "Well, what's going on?" he asked. "I can see in the dark, but it's all weird and gray." "Hatchlings developed that much earlier," Seafscale said. "Yours was hindered by spending too much time out in the light. Did you think that dragons would prefer the darkness of caves if they had to rely on illumination?" "This is—" Spike looked around and walked forward. He could see even the pebbles by his feet in detail. "This is pretty cool," he said. "A week spent well," Seafscale said. Spike suddenly found himself enthusiastic. "So what are we going to do next?" he asked. "Sleep." It was barely dawn when Spike was awake and walking about the cave, marveling at his newfound ability. He picked up a pebble and inspected it, picking out individual grooves and niches on it just for fun. "Cute," Seafscale said softly from behind him. "You're acting like a hatchling given his very first bauble." Spike tossed the pebble away in embarrassment. "I can't help it," he said. "I've never been able to do something like this." "Dark vision has its uses." Seafscale rose from her bed. "You're lucky to still be able to develop it." "So what are we doing now?" Spike asked. "We're going out. I'm taking you with me this time. Before we go, we must go over a few rules." Spike sat down and listened eagerly. The mention of rules was one more familiarity he could take comfort in. "What are they?" he asked. "Anywhere outside my cave, I will call you Sevraladar. You must answer to this name only. The ponies you've encountered in Wolforge have been similarly warned." "What's wrong with Spike?" Spike asked. "It's not a dragon name. If the Dracodim and their agents find out, you'll die along with whoever gave you that name." This new worry quickly crushed any enthusiasm Spike had. "Draco what?" he asked. "Who are they, and why should they care about my name?" "They are currently the strongest and most influential group within dragonkind," Seafscale said. "We shouldn't have too much trouble with them thanks to the Heartland's Purge keeping them busy." "So they're sort of the dragon rulers, and hey, what do you mean by Heartland Purge?" Seafscale looked grimly towards the outside of her cave. "Of course you haven't heard. With the barrier down, the Dracodim are extending their influence towards the Heartland. A purge is already on the way." "And by purge you mean—" "Yes, killing." Spike paused, outrage temporarily taking away his ability to talk. He remembered all the dragons he had encountered in the Heartland. None of those encounters had at all been pleasant, but for them to be killed just didn't seem right. "We've got to stop them," he said. "Equestria would never allow dragons to be killed just like that." "You're wrong," Seafscale replied. Her emotionless tone ran counterpoint to Spike's angry words. "Equestria would allow it. The Dracodyms' methods may be harsh, but Equestria stands only to benefit from their actions." "What? Why?" The Dracodim enforce many rules. Among them is a rule of not eating ponies and leaving their settlements alone, so long as they don't monopolize resources. Without the Dracodim, the Legion will have to deal with more than just your occasional rampaging greed dragon. So all of Equestria will just let these Dracodim kill as many dragons as they like? Yes. Spike stamped his foot as hard as he could. The barely audible thump only made him angrier. But that's not right. Right for whom? It's right for ponies to not want to be eaten. What about the dragons? What dragons do to each other is not Equestria's concern. Seafscale moved closer towards Spike. There was nothing threatening about her movement, but Spike still felt the urge to back up a bit before looking up at her. I understand how you feel, and you're right. The Dracodim's continued existence will only continue to hurt dragonkind as a race. Then why do you just let it happen? Spike asked. I'm not a dragon. Why should I be bothered if dragons are destroyed by their own pride? Seafscale gazed at Spike intently. Let dragons settle this issue among themselves. I'm a dragon, Spike said, his tone low and defiant. Are you sure? It was only yesterday that you could even use your dark vision. Before Spike could retort, Seafscale's unicorn horn glowed slightly. I need to be alone, she said. Go outside and prepare yourself. We'll be leaving soon. In a huff, Spike left the cave. Once he was out of sight, Seafscale pointed her unicorn horn at a cave wall. The projected image of Prince Terrado looked at her a few seconds later. Your Highness, she said reverently.
Hey, Seafscale,
Terrado said with a smile.
How's your new ward progressing?
Faster than expected, Seafscale replied.
And that small detail I mentioned?
Also progressing well.
Good.
Terrado's eyes narrowed as he went on.
Some chosen should have arrived in Wolforge by now, have you noticed?
Yes, Your Highness.
Luna's taken a page from my book by having her own personal eyes among them,
Terrado said. There was a tinge of admiration in his tone as well as more of a hint of annoyance.
It's possible that she might try to contact you as well. I don't want my sisters to get wind of your other task. Not yet.
She will learn nothing save for Spike's condition, Your Highness.
Good. Speaking of your other task.
Nazadar and Himfadora have already agreed to your propositions, Your Highness. I am making headway with the others, but Spike's progress will be crucial.
I'm counting on you, Seafscale.
I won't fail you. The image disappeared and Seafscale walked out to meet her ward. The dragon kept his eyes on her. Though he was still a little angry, she noticed something in his gaze that wasn't there when he first entered her cave. Trust. Let's go, she said. Okay, every pony, what do you think is going on here? I mean, yeah, Seafscale had to get used to Spike, and Spike had to, well, spend some time in isolation to get this awesome dark vision that apparently hatchlings develop much sooner usually. Do you think that Seafscale is really getting used to him? What do you think about the Dracodim, that coalition of dragons that is now, well, attempting to purge the Heartland dragons? What do you think about Seafscale's teaching methods? And not to forget, what do you think about Seafscale herself and the other tasks that Terrado mentioned? Who are those other, I can only assume, dragons, Nazadar and Himfadora? Sincerely yours, Visual Pony, and looking forward to your opinion.